All right, howdy guys. I am going to do just a bit of an impromptu stream here. Um, and let me get camera adjusted a little bit, and I'll wait for some people to join in. I didn't make any kind of announcement on this. But what I'm going to be doing today is some assembly on the 3D printed Serpent, which I've got here. And I'll just kind of walk you through the process of what I do in prepping it. So the 3D printed Serpent is 3/4 of the way complete for the body, and then I've got the bocal here, so it just kind of fits in there and nicely moves about. So I'll kind of run down exactly what's going on here. So the body is made of 20 parts, and it's numbered from the small end 20 to the big end at 1. So 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 5 is printing right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be prepping part number 6 to put on. So first thing I'm going to do is I need to do some sanding here. And what I've got is, this is a 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to go ahead and sand out the joints. Mostly where I need to sand is on the joints. They're not perfect, and I did make a mistake last night. Well, not necessarily a mistake, but it was an experiment that didn't turn out like I had hoped. So what I did is I went and got some silicone sealant to just seal up between the joints, and I thought it would be a good idea to just put a layer of the sealant over the whole thing. Well, this morning after it dried, it all came off. So I'm going to have to rethink that. And as I'm just rubbing through here, the sealant is coming off. So I'm just going to have to take a good sandpaper to that joint and start over. What does work though is just good old super glue. And that's what I'll be using to seal the joints together. All right, that's a little bit better. And as I go along and get this more and more prepped, I will go to finer and finer grit sandpaper. So this is 220. I've got a 110 or a 150. I've got a 400, and then I've got like a 1200 grit that I will use for the final finishing. All right. So the next step I need to do is prep the surface here. This surface here is, as you can hear by my fingernail scratching over it, is super rough. So I'm going to take the roughest grit sandpaper I have, which is this 150, and I'm just going to go over the edge. And I want to knock off as much of the grit as possible. And if you're watching, I know there's a couple people watching right now. Go ahead and say hi. If you got any questions, let me know. And the reason I need to do this is I have found that there's two surfaces on the ends of this when you're printing. There is the flat surface that goes down on the 3D printer bed itself, and then there is the raised surface. So when this was printing, this surface here on this joint was completely flat. It didn't need but just a little light sanding to make it perfectly flat. This end, however, was printed on an angle, which resulted in really heavy ridges. And as I run my fingernail over it now, it's considerably smoother. Not perfect, but as long as the glue will adhere to this and to the surface of the other joint, I should be in pretty good shape. Yeah, and that's a lot better. I'm pretty happy with that. All right, so this is joint number 6, and it's going to attach here like this. But it is going to be that rough edge against this rough edge, so I've got to sand this one down too. So I'll just do the same thing here. Normally I would do this on a table. Why am I making a serpent? It's a good question. I really do like authentic period performance, and there are several early band works that require the serpent, including works by Beethoven. Yeah, Beethoven actually wrote for Serpent in a few pieces. Handel's original scoring for the music for the Royal Fireworks had a serpent, though we're not sure exactly what part it was playing. It was probably playing along with the contrabassoon, just to provide the bass line. But yeah, so it will be in my collection to use for wind ensemble performances. And I'm going to go ahead and sand out this other side too here. And one of the interesting things is this particular serpent is a copy of an instrument found in the Bate collection in London. And what they did several years ago is they did some study on it. It's an anonymous instrument from the 1800s, and they made publicly available the 3D print files of it, so anybody with a 3D printer can print one. This is an ideal instrument for 3D printing because of the complex shape. It's actually very difficult to make a serpent in the traditional manufacturing process. What they would do is the instrument would be cut in half down the length of it, then hollowed out, and then glued back together, and then wrapped in leather to seal it up. Well, with 3D printing technology, you don't have to cut it in half then seal it with leather. You can actually make this weird complex tube. All right. Now, one cool thing about the file is there are guide holes between each of the joints. So if you look at the end joint, you might be able to see two little holes in there that are the guide holes. Now this particular model has guide holes for a 3mm thread, but I'm using a 1.75mm thread. And what you do is you just take a piece of filament and you put it in the hole and then cut it off, and then it'll line up with the other one. Yes, the traditional method was extremely leak prone. And even, if it was, covered with that leather, I mean, they were pretty leaky instruments. All right, I'm going to look for something real quick on my table here. I'm looking for a little pair of nippers, but I think this will work just fine. Just a box cutter, and I need to cut a small length of this. Okay, and what I will do is make sure this will fit in the hole. Perfect. And same thing here. Perfect. Now, before I glue, I'm going to make sure that the parts fit together. And seems like it, so that's what it will look like. This is the finger holes for the right hand. So I'll be able to play a few notes. Okay. All right, what does Sweeter say? I know keyed brass will always have its challenges, but it's great that you can make one that's much less complicated. Yeah, I mean, and what I will do once this is eventually finished here in a few days is I will do a comparison video between the Serpent and the Ophiclyde, which is behind me right here. And I would like to do a multi-track video where I do the Dies Irae from Symphonie Fantastique, where the first part's on Serpent and the bottom part's on Ophiclyde, as was the original scoring. And oh, lo and behold, my super glue has clogged up. So super glue for working with this particular filament, which is this is a PLA filament I'm printing with, is the preferred glue. It binds really well, really quickly. However, if I were doing this in ABS plastic, I would not be using super glue. I would actually just use straight acetone. And the acetone will actually chemically weld the parts together. A trick I learned from Richard Bobo. So, using this, I've already gone through a couple tubes of super glue. Got to make sure everything here is covered. We'll put that back. Get this out, and I got to move pretty quickly here. Okay, I'm in the hole there, I'm in the hole there. And I'm just going to press this together, and hopefully the simpler keyhole should make quarter tones easier on the Serpent, the Ophiclydes, or quarter tone. This will play quarter tones all day long. It is a pitch bending machine. That's about all it can do is pitch bend. In fact, the lowest tones of the Serpent are just the same fingering. You just lip it down. Hey guys. So yeah, I should be all nice and set now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a bead of super glue around the outside here. I'm also going to get a drink of coffee. Okay, so I'm drinking out of a Ravenclaw mug now. I really should be drinking out of a Slytherin mug. Make a 3D printed Ophiclyde. Why would I make a 3D printed Ophiclyde? I've got one. Boom, right here. There's your Ophiclyde. This would actually be much more difficult to 3D print because of the keys. It would actually be cheaper to go and buy a Wessex or a Schiller Ophiclyde than to 3D print one. I could 3D print the body, I can't 3D print the keys. And the keys are the all-important part there. Serpent for jazz bass. I don't think that's going to be a very good idea, Sweeter. It's really... It's the most squirrely instrument I've ever tried playing. And granted, I haven't played the whole instrument yet, and it gets better the more pieces I put on, but it is still... Ugh. Yes, Ryan, I do intend to do an original version of Symphonie Fantastique. Just a multi-track video between the Ophiclyde and the Serpent. But... Alright, so the next part here is put on. And I'm just going to... Ooh, my, that moved quite a bit. Wait a few minutes here for that glue to dry. I'm not going to play it because... But you can see it's now really coming along. And the bend will continue on and be another complete bend, and the bell should be about right here. Overall, this is not terribly heavy. I printed this with, I'm printing it right now with a 30% infill, meaning it's 30% filled in. So you would play it in a couple different ways. One is in kind of this vertical position between the legs. And let me just grab a mouthpiece real quick. This is just my off-Clyde mouthpiece. And now, of course, the instrument is not finished. The notes are not going to come out as well as they should. Is the off-Clyde mouthpiece a similar size to a small bore trombone mouthpiece? It's actually a hair smaller. So I actually have a small bore trombone mouthpiece sitting right behind me. So off-Clyde mouthpiece is here. This is a Bach 6.5 AL trombone mouthpiece. Next, contrabass Serpent. In theory, I could do it. I don't think that the 3D printer is actually big enough to handle it with the files. So with the program I'm using for what's called slicing, it's called Cura, I can scale these files up to any size. So I could do a 200% file in order to print a contrabass Serpent. However, you run into the very finite limit of how big your 3D printer can go. However, what the Bait Collection does say on their website is you can print this at at 50% and get a serpenteau or a lizard, and I probably will do that. And it's by printing it at 50%. It's a quarter of the print time. So instead of, this takes 200 hours to print. That does not count any of the prep work that I'm doing now. And so, yeah, just 200 hours in the printer alone just to print this out. Will I ever score for off-Clyde in one of my works? I have some sketches right now for a suite for off-Clyde and piano that I'm working on that I think Richard Demme will play at some point. So a keyed bugle and Serpent shape, basically. Well, without the keys, yeah. As for including writing for an off-Clyde or a Serpent in one of my larger pieces, probably not. At least not anytime soon. And spoiler alert, I am thinking about what the possibility of Symphony 5 is going to be. So I have started some ideas. I need a 3D printer and a contra alto clarinet so bad. I want to play it professionally. All right, Caden, I'm gonna spoil your dream for you. You can't play contra alto clarinet professionally. It's not a thing. There's not any professional groups that you're going to be able to play contra alto clarinet exclusively. I mean, I am friends with the contra clarinet player of the Dallas Winds, formerly the Dallas Wind Symphony, and she's kind of an auxiliary low reed person. So she will play she mostly plays contra alto clarinet, but also contrabass clarinet and bass sax. But she might be one of the only people in the country that has a professional contra clarinet job on a regular basis. That said, they only perform 6 to 8 times a year, and not every concert they do is going to have that part. So you're dealing with something that's going to have single digits. If you want to do it as like a solo career, Maybe. But, all right. So next step here is I need to do some sanding, and I'm going to use my 220 grit sandpaper. And let me know if that's kind of annoying on the microphone. I'm using a new lavalier mic today. In other news, I have started the filming of the new documentary series that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing some more filming today. And what it's going to be is every month I'm going to put out like a 30-minute documentary on the history of the wind band. And the first one I'm hoping will be out by the end of January. And right now I'm planning about 3 seasons worth, so three years, so like 36 total episodes. So the first season would be beginning up to like 1900, and then second season be 1900 today. And then I'd actually in season 3 like to do wind band diversity, focusing on diverse groups, so that we're not just talking about a bunch of white European guys. I want to play all low woodwinds, but I want to play bassoon, contrabassoon, and bari sax. I'm okay with playing more than just contra alto professionally, like in an ensemble. Practice, practice, practice. Do I have any a New Year resolution, Brent? It's not correct, people, when they call me Brent. All right. Okay, so that's not pretty, but it'll work. And I'll go over that in just a little bit with, actually, I want to do this right here. So oh yeah, that. So yeah, I said earlier in the stream that I tried an experiment yesterday where I wanted to fill in the gaps here with a silicone sealant, and after it dried overnight, all the sealant just kind of rubbed off. So yeah. So that was a bad idea. But the whole thing is coming together a lot better. Yes, if you're going to be a professional player, you've got to, as Sweeter says, if you want to be a low clarinet player, you have to have the chops on regular B-flat clarinet first. If, even like in a professional, say a contrabassoon player, if they go to an audition, the first round is going to be bassoon only. They're not going to want to hear your contrabassoon playing until the second round. Okay, let's see how this is playing now. So right off the bat, it is awkward. Okay, what key is this in? This instrument is in C. They also made ophicleides in D, a step higher. This is what we call a church ophicleide. There's church ophicleides and military ophicleides, and the difference is the church ophicleide has no keys. I'm sorry, this isn't an ophicleide, this is a serpent. The church serpent had a couple of keys, so it would have an extra key here, and there'd be, I think, a key over here for the right hand. But it's just got 6 finger holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in theory, the fingering should be kind of like that of a Baroque flute. However, they're not in the acoustically correct positions. We should see the keys spaced out much more even, or the finger holes spaced out much more evenly. Instead, they're grouped together. And even as close as they are, my fingers have a really, really big stretch. So without joints 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here, which would make up the last loop, these finger holes are pretty much useless. So let me see. Nope, it's got to go this way. So yeah, it will get quite a bit better once more parts are put on. Once the whole thing is finished, but yeah, so that's my assembly process, and really the next thing I'm going to do is go through and do just a lot more sanding, which I come from a long line of obsessive sanders, so this is going to be quite nice. Yeah, the Baroque oboe needs a lot of work. I've got to build the keys for it. I actually have the sheet brass. I just don't right now have a way. Well, I guess I can go over to my parents' house and use some of their power tools. But I've got to cut the keys out of sheet brass. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully in a few days I will be able to do a full-on video talking about the 3D printed Serpent, but this is just kind of impromptu. I'm shooting from my iPhone instead of from my big setup, and actually probably the quality is just as good from the iPhone, but now it's just sanding, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to end up putting like a coat of spray lacquer on it in the end, but yeah, we'll see. But anyway, if you guys have, I'll stick around for another couple minutes if you guys have any more questions. It is still a work in progress. And also, I am going to be working later today on design some of the first models for the Great Bassoon, and I'm going to do those. I'm going to start with the boot joint of that and kind of work up, and I will be sending off the designs to the 3D modeler, who should then be able to turn those pretty quickly into a printable model, which means that hopefully I will have a 3D model of the boot joint and U-bend of the Great Bassoon within a couple weeks, and I should then be able to 3D print from there. Yeah, it looks good enough to eventually use on stage visually after all sanding and other finishing. Yeah, and I really want to see kind of how fine I can get the texture on it, because right now, I mean, it looks pretty scratched up with just the what's been going on it, the sanding. But I'm thinking when I switch to the really fine grit sandpaper, it'll work quite well. What is the Great Bassoon going to look like? It's essentially going to be a giant bassoon that's, I think the design right now is 6'6". Not terrible. It's like 2 inches taller than Richard's subcontra bassoon. We actually had the models next to each other last week. I met up with Richard, and mine's a bit taller, but his is definitely a lot bigger. Which was really fun because in the same room we had an octave bassoon, a tenor bassoon, a regular bassoon, a contra bassoon, and the drawings for the subcontra bassoon and the great bassoon. So we had representations of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bassoons in the same room, which is pretty awesome. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, Jared De Leon and I are going to be working together on the Great Bassoon. He's a 3D modeler, so I've got kind of the design aspect of it, and I know more about like bassoon keywork and stuff and mechanics. So he and I will be working together. Oh yeah. Like I said, this is just 220. I've got a 400 here. Actually, where's my 400? 400 is behind me. And then 120 somewhere, or not 120, 1200. And, oh, I know I can get up to like 2,000, 3,000. But luckily, Home Depot is almost within walking distance of my place. So I can always go get stuff. Anyway, guys, if you don't have any more questions, we'll go ahead and end it now. And yeah, so 3D printed Serpent. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you guys for joining. So, all right, and hopefully by the end of the week, I'll be able to show a full 3D printed Serpent, do a review on it, and some play tests. But yeah, there it is.